So today we are here with, I actually can pronounce this, Yoshi, right?
There you go. That's
Yoshi.
the one.
I'm so terrible. I just the interview with Dylan, I was like, yeah, no, I need to change the podcast name to Ask Me How Things Work. Don't ask me what they're called.
That's funny.
Yeah. And so, yeah, you've got a YouTube channel, all sorts of stuff going on in your life down in Florida with all the stuff going on down there. Modern Reptiles, and I would like to know your backstory. What's why'd you get into reptiles and stuff?
Unlike most people, I didn't grow up with reptiles. I know that a lot of people, like grew up out, pretty much catching lizards and stuff outside. I didn't want to do that. I was not that kid. My cousins used to do it, and I was like grossed out by it. I spent a lot of time. I was in like the music field. I was in like a bunch of like heavy metal bands, and that's kind of like what I did growing up. And then from there, one day, like just through like a circle of friends in this like Miami music scene, I ended up with a turtle for some reason. I guess I was kind of like, turtles are cool. But I have an obsessive personality. That turtle became another turtle. That turtle became a couple other turtles. And from there, I started touring a lot in the band that I was in. And I ended up giving, I lent all my turtles to one of my friends. I was like, yo, like, I'm going to be gone for like 3 months. Can you just like take care of these turtles? And when I came back, we had a bunch of babies. I've always been very business savvy since I was a kid. I used to like trade and sell Pokemon cards and like hustle for Pokemon cards. So I just used that knowledge for reptiles. And I was like, wait, I think I can do something with this. And then through that, I really found specifically a passion for turtles and tortoises. And I just figured a way through that passion to get into like the broader reptile industry community kind of thing. And now I'm here.
I went in for fish.
Okay.
And came out a couple weeks later with a couple bearded dragons.
Nice. Yeah. So my dad, my whole life, he bred birds. So I was always exposed to animals. And when I was like real young, I was like, oh, maybe one day I'll be a vet because my dad works with birds. But I have horrible allergies. You're going to hear me sniffle throughout this whole episode. And so I didn't, I threw that dream out. I was like, there's no way I can be a vet if I'm sneezing every 5 minutes. And I never thought of reptiles. I never thought like, wait, like I'm not going to be allergic to this scaled animal,
Yeah. I heard you on one of your podcasts. You were talking about you preferred the turtles and stuff. So now that makes a lot of sense. Like usually what we start with is something that usually gets baked in. Pitch the bitch is my first bearded dragon. She's super independent and actually super intelligent for a beardy. And that's my baby girl. It's like a child. It's literally my grandfather said something that I'll never forget about children, because I wouldn't take $1 million for my kids, but I wouldn't give a nickel for another one.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's kind of how I am with Pitch. Like it's like no, that's my girl. You can't have her.
Yeah.
No, your podcast. I'm a little different on mine, but I found some of it to be quite interesting, and I like Daniel Parker and stuff like that, and I like some of the stuff you guys talk about. Some of it I'm kind of, and I mean, but that's kind of the point of it, isn't it? Like, what's
So this was the angle. Originally, I started the podcast about a year or two before the style of its current iteration. And it was just me and my cousin, that is my business partner in Modern Reptile or Modern Reptile Shop. And we would mainly talk about like our ball pythons, like some blue tongues, a little bit of turtles and tortoises, and then we used to bring in people from like our reptile friends in Miami, and we used to just do that. But the broader picture when I first sought out to do the podcast is that I didn't want to 100% do that style. I always wanted to be able to, talk about reptile news, talk about the reptiles, talk about products and stuff like that. But I didn't want it to be similar to a lot of the reptile podcasts that were out there, which were, so like very specific. And like, if you weren't like really 100% paying attention, like it was difficult. And I realized that I personally didn't even listen to reptile podcasts, and then I was like, I wonder why that is. And I thought about it, and I thought about the kinds of podcasts that I did listen to, which were comedy podcasts. So when I did my move to Central Florida and I got to meet Tino and I got to meet Chucky, we would have these conversations just between the three of us. And then I was like, this is kind of like the vibe that I get from the podcast that I listen to. We're talking about the subject matter that I wanted to talk about. And I just kind of had a conversation with them. I was like, hey, like, what if we just did like an extension of the existing podcast that I'm doing, just an extra episode a week, but us three. And then because of my move to Central Florida, the podcast that I would do with my cousin, that kind of like phased out just because of like scheduling issues. And the one with Chuck and Tino became the main one. And we just were like really stuck to the style that we have now, where it's just like, no, like it's not supposed to be for everybody. There's substance, but it's like entertainment. It's, comedy based. But the main thing is just that we try our best to be transparently ourselves. So the people that you see on the podcast, mind you, like we liven it up because we're in front of a camera and we're trying to, we are trying to be entertaining. But most importantly, it's like, no, you are getting the people we are. Like when we get off of the camera, we don't have to be like, oh my God, we just acted and now whoever meets us in the future, like we have to make that character. Like no, that character is me. Like I can't go a long period of time without cursing. I just can't. I can't. I can't go a long period of time without making a joke or trying to make light of something. That's the way I am. Chucky can't go a long period of time without being obnoxious and stating his truth and getting in your face with the way that he feels about things. And then Tino can't go a long period of time without asking you uncomfortable questions. And it just worked. It just worked the way that it was.
Yeah, I get that, man. Like I was talking with Dylan, and it's like my brain's just everywhere, and so it's really hard for people to follow me because I am a scientist. I do have like degrees in physics and polymer chemistry and studies in nonverbal human communication and chaos theory and all sorts of stuff. So, I mean, for me, it's like, no, my brain's just like boom, boom, boom. And the audience doesn't really like that. And I don't really care about the names of things. I care about how it works. So that's really a struggle. I always make the jokes. No, friggin', I'm a real scientist, not a biologist. I don't name shit for a living. No. I've been wanting to say this all day already. Is the cast? I just got the splint off Wednesday, and I'm just now starting to get a function where my wrist can actually move back. It's the hair, so I'm trying to go back to work Monday. So we know what I'm doing all weekend because I got to work that out.
Nice.
So. That's wrong. It's there's so many things out there in the world that are just it's hilarious when you can talk stupid shit. I was at work, and I work for Bear Crop Science, so I apologize for us being the chemicals that get spread all over your deal. We know about it as scientists, and we do talk about it. But it's like I was dumping out some buckets of chemicals, and usually I leave a hose in there because the hose needs to get cleaned out from the inside. So the water needs to kind of circulate through the hose a little bit to get that out of there. So usually the hose is in the bucket. So I'm dumping out the bucket, and I'm like, where the hell's my hose? Oh, I know where my hose are at. Oh, it's so stupid. It's so stupid. It made me laugh so hard.
Yeah.
We have a company up here called Menards. It's literally you pick up freaking 2x4s, a dog house, a freaking your groceries, and freaking anything you could possibly imagine. Home Depot and Walmart's put together. Like it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
But the name is Menards.
Okay.
And the deal is you can save money at Menards. Oh yeah, you can save money at Menards.
There you go. Yeah, so like something that I know is gonna be like super dumb just to like understand the vibe that we all have as like friends on the podcast.
Yeah.
Like I can't hear anybody say that they're going somewhere. Like if somebody's like, "Oh yeah, I'm coming," it's just like it's like that. It's like that. Like we're dumb like that.
So you'll be happy when you get here.
Yeah. So we're just a bunch of fools, and what we found out is that even though we have a very big like difference in the way that we fit into what is the reptile community, is like the reality is that the four of us, because there's also another person, it's Eric, and he's the one that helps us do the sound while we're recording. He's the one that's in charge of that stuff. But the four of us have a common interest just in general reptiles. Like that is what we like. You know, and even though, you know, for example, Chucky he hates racks. I keep racks. Tino's like, I don't think racks are great, but there's a place for it specifically in the pet trade, and it makes sense for certain things, you know. And we're able to have a bunch of conversations just because we have such a difference in opinions. But most importantly, like we're friends, so like we could say things to each other and like not really get offended, you know. And even if we get, exactly. And even if we get a little bit uncomfortable, like there can be a conversation because we're friends. Like it's like, hey man, like that was a little much, you know. And then we are able to set our own boundaries and stuff like that. So I think we've developed, I think we developed something a little bit outside of the norm and a little bit different from the reptile community, because I think a lot of what is there is too similar. You know, it's like, okay, we're going to do this style of podcast, but for this species. And now we're going to do the same style of podcast for that species, and this style of podcast for that species, you know. And it's like, okay, but we're just copy and pasting the same formula. And I just decided, fuck it, I'm just going to use my influences, which is from a different industry in itself, and put it into what it is that we do here.
And then I see it, and I'm like, okay, so your viewership's not that bad. Like I mean, I don't know what your retention time is.
Honestly, I mean, this is a little bit of like insider baseball, but after, I don't know if you watch any comedy podcasts, but so are you familiar with Andrew Schultz?
I don't know very many names, so I don't.
Okay. So there's a podcast called Flagrant, and it's with Andrew Schultz and a couple other comedians. And they had Mr. Beast on, and you know, we pretty much, Chuck and I are like really into that podcast, and we listened to what he had to say and how he's like so like meticulous about retention. We listened to Mr. Beast did a podcast with Joe Rogan, same thing, talking about retention. So we try our best to keep the retention up, and Chuck specifically really does, like every Sunday that we meet for a podcast, he's like, yo, give me the phone so I can check the retention. And we are watching it, we are watching for moments, we are seeing like, you know, the big things. And you know, I because our podcast is pre-produced, you know, it's not live, so we record it, and I go through and I edit around, you know. I make sure that if there are any words that we shouldn't say on YouTube, I make sure to edit those out, you know, stuff like that. If there are any moments, like how are they going to be highlighted a little bit better? Where can I place them? When am I going to put our quote unquote like commercial slots, you know, in order to like move forward with conversations? And I will cut out sections where I'm like, okay, we're dragging here. Like there was no reason to go 10 minutes on for Chuck and Tino to argue about the same shit that we argued 4 or 5 episodes ago, you know. So like I'll cut like moments like that, put in a commercial, and then flip to the next like highlighted part. And then like even in the description, like Eric specifically, like one of his like tasks for the podcast while he's making sure that the sound's okay, we have a sheet that is like the times that we speak about certain subjects. So that way I can go back and I can put a timestamp of all the subjects that we talk about. You know, so we're like we try our best to be as meticulous as possible with understanding what our limits are, because at the end of the day, like the reality is we're not really making money out of the podcast. It's just like it's for fun, you know, and as it grows, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So we are limited to what our production value can be but we do our best with the tools that we have.
I just, all I kept hearing was team. Like it is a team, and boy, that would be massively helpful to have just one other person that actually cared. Yeah.
I got lucky in that. I think the thing that ties it all together is just because we're all friends. Chuck, I have to give a lot of credit. Honestly, I really do have to give a lot of credit to Chucky, because it's not without his direction that we're able to do a lot of these things. He's kind of like the social media brain. And also I have to give credit to like Tino, because Tino is like really the guy that helps us locate a lot of these topics and stuff like that we talk about, and really is the one that stirs the pot. I kind of like, I have a much more like hands-on approach, and I just try to find jokes, and I like, you know, try to like structure the thing, you know. But because of that, because we're all so passionate about reptiles, we found this outlet, and it has made us dedicated to it. I've been in situations before when I was doing music, that like some of the bands that I'm in, like it's typical for not everybody in a band to carry their weight. It's typical that there's usually one or two songwriters, and then there's somebody else that's really good at like setting up the equipment and stuff like that. In my case, I was usually the person that wanted to do it all. Like I wanted to be the person, like I'm decent at songwriting. So I was like, I'm going to write a lot of these songs because the other people weren't good at songwriting. I also have a very good handle of the equipment. Like I'm just going to set it up. And I had a decent handle on what I was doing on social media for the band. So I was like, I'm going to do that and I'm going to do this. But what you find is that you can't do it all. So I'm extremely grateful that, you know, between Chuck, Tino, and Eric, that they have dedicated so much into a project that even though I started is equally the 4 of ours. Because I know that I put a lot on myself personally, and they really do help me a bunch. And so every like couple months I have conversations with them, and I'm like, yo, like, do you guys still want to do this? And like, I'm about to start, like, I might buy a piece of equipment. I'm like, oh, I'm going to buy that. It's going to be a little expensive. And like, I'm not asking you guys to pitch in, but like, are we still going to do this? Because I want to make sure that I'm making this financial choice and we're still going to do this. And they always give me like this face and this remark, like, yeah, obviously we're going to do this. Like, what are we talking about? And I was like, all right, you know.
I like that. That's actually a super positive thing that I would push. But, you know, sometimes I'm sure my audience feels like I have low quality videos. It's like, no, I'm doing this by myself. I'm like, right now I've been out of a job for a couple weeks. I mean, I still have a job. Just because of my surgery, I can't go to work. So I'm not getting any money at all. And this thing doesn't bring in money. I actually spend money, but my goals have been very big. Because I actually have, like, I have psychological studies on here. I have all sorts of stuff. And I try to bring in people that I know can actually contribute. Bill Stewart, I don't know if you know who that is.
The chameleon dude? Is that guy?
That's Bill Strand.
Oh, Bill Strand. Okay. There's too many Bills.
I know, right? Bill Stewart.
One of you has to go by William. One of you guys.
Well, I call Bill Stewart the monkey lizard. Okay. Because Roy from the herpetology, whatever that is, herpiculture podcast.
Oh, Counterculture Network.
Yeah, he's a friend of mine. And Roy was talking about monkey lizards. I eventually found out it was monkey and Knowles, and I looked up monkey lizards, and it kept bringing up the Star Wars character.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, so I had Bill Stewart on with my local rescue, Keely and stuff, on what kind of people do hospice for reptiles.
Uh-huh.
And so freaking he came on, and I was like, hey, dude, every time I see you, you're like in a background of a video. Like he's in the background of Dave Kaufman's Zoom Ed video or something, and just in the background of everything that you could possibly find in anything that's happening in Wisconsin with reptiles. He's in the background, every facility, every rescue, all that stuff. So it's like, so you're like the Salacious Crumb of the, and he knew the name of the animal because he was on, what is that? Snake Discovery. He was on a couple of the first years of the build-off.
Got you.
And so he used the Star Wars deal. He's a big Star Wars fan, so he was pretty happy about that. He's not upset. So
well, he must be getting fed real good with Star Wars right now because Ahsoka is awesome.
I haven't caught the latest episode. I thought it was pretty decent.
Bro.
But I didn't hate it.
I know that this is not reptile related. This is a reptile podcast.
Hey,
you talk about reptiles, but look, listen. I'm a couple things. I like music. I am a nerd, and reptiles and comedy. Those are my things. But the last episode of Ahsoka, if you're a fan of like Clone Wars, Rebels, and if you're a little bit deeper into the lore, that episode was for you. And the next episode 5 that's supposed to be coming out is like getting so hyped right now, saying that it's going to be like the best piece of Star Wars that has ever been released. And they're even letting it out not only on Disney Plus, like they're putting it out in select theaters across the country because of how big the event's supposed to be. I'm not going to spoil anything, even though I love spoilers. I'm not going to do it. But yeah, you got to watch this last episode, and it's great. Unlike
a lot of people, I am actually a fan of Rebels.
Yeah,
I'm actually a fan of it. I actually enjoyed it. Darth Maul's death. I don't care who the hell you are. If you are a Star Wars fan and you did not get something from a nanosecond clip.
Yeah.
It's like it was so well done.
So I mean, we can move on from the Star Wars topic in a second, but I never watched to completion Rebels or Clone Wars because I'm not a fan of the animation, but I know the things that go on because I used to watch a bunch of like recaps just so I could know because I do like Star Wars. I just didn't want to watch it. I'm not a fan of the animation. My friend Manny from Tiki's Geckos, he's the one that's telling me. He's like, bro, like just watch Clone Wars. Just watch it. Like it's great. I'm like, fine, dude. I'm literally watching it for him, but so like I know everything that goes on and has gone on. So like watching a lot of these things that are happening right now in that show, it's insane. It's insane.
Yeah, and see that's the interesting part. Like so for people out there that keep reptiles, why?
Uh-huh.
Like my buddy, somebody that I know from back home, and he's like, it used to be this counterculture.
Like
now it's not. Now it's more mainstream. You almost, back in the day, you almost get into it almost because you're wanting to be something different from the culture.
Yeah. So my company, Modern Reptile, used to be called a couple things. When I first got into the turtles, we were half shell ranch.
After your podcast, people call it a lot of things.
Yeah, exactly. So originally, the name of the company was Half Shell Ranch, right? And it was Half Shell Ranch because of the Ninja Turtles, and we only had turtles, right? Then I got into the ball pythons. I got into the blue tongues. It got a little more vague, so we hyphenated, or is it not hyphenated? It's you get the letters of the beginning of the of the words. It's early, whatever. We changed
I'm
it
a
to
math
H.
major for a reason. I couldn't tell you.
There you go. We changed it to HSR Exotics, right? The problem is that everybody and their mother is either last name Exotics or Reptiles or fucking 3 letters Reptiles, 3 letters Exotics, you know, that kind of situation. So I was like, yo, like, nobody's ever going to recognize this company if we don't change the name. And so I sat down with my cousin and my brother-in-law. Those are my business partners for Modern Reptile. And I was like, what do we all have in common? What we all have in common is we're a bunch of nerds. Like, we love Marvel, we love Star Wars, we love DC. At the time, we were reading a lot of comics. And I was like, and I also like anime. And I was like, dude, I remember when I was a kid, you know, I saw that I used to like Naruto a lot. I grew up with the character of Naruto as he was growing up, but I had to be, for lack of a better term, I had to be closeted about my interest in anime because I would get bullied. But now all these kids are like loving anime, and I'm like, dude, I wish I was born now where I could be open about my interests and have friends, you know? So what ended up happening, I was like, it's crazy how like counterculture, nerd culture became pop culture. It modernized it. And I was like, it's similar in the sense of like the reptile community where it was so like in, you know, in the depths of culture, and now it's like really out there. So I was like, oh, we should kind of like use this name Modern Reptile. And there was another company called Modern Reptiles. And I was like, damn, dude, like I'm just going to not make it plural. And then the website's just going to say shop. So I was like, Modern Reptile shop. That's like, was the whole thing of that.
Ask me about my name later here in a bit, because I might forget. But yeah, it's interesting. Man, I'm literally, did I just forget that question? But it's okay. So if the actual, oh God, I'm trying to think. So when I lived in the apartment like for a long time, and it was shitty. Like, so the people there were not being taken care of. So they were probably very stressed, and you would see that. So when I would take my dragons out, let one of them hold it, that they would get this, like, you would just get this positive vibe from them. Like their whole stress just melted away for that little bit of time of holding a simple bearded dragon. And it's so cool to see that kind of shit. And I don't think you get that in too many other countercultures. I don't think you get that in anime and stuff. You feel bonds with other people, but I don't know. It's a very interesting question that I just thought up.
Well, so the way that because I didn't really get into like comics and stuff like that until I got older. Like as a kid, I watched the first anime. Everybody always starts with Dragon Ball Z. I didn't like Dragon Ball Z until I got older, but I started with Yu Yu Hakusho, and then Yu Yu Hakusho went to Naruto, and then my brother-in-law was into comics. My cousin was into watching like the live action DC shows and like the Marvel movies. So when they announced that Tom Holland was going to be Spider-Man, and I was a big Spider-Man fan, I was like, damn, dude, like maybe I should watch all these Marvel movies and get into it. And then my brother-in-law was like, damn, look at this comic that I have. And then in my hand, I saw the comic, and I was like, I can kind of get into this. So it was like similar in the sense of like somebody holding a reptile, where I was like holding the comic book, and I was like, oh no, this is like a reality for me. And then I got into it from there.
That's a good point. I like this kind of talk because I do psychological studies on here. That's very interesting to think, okay, and that makes a lot of sense too. Like that positive vibe that you can get from something that just kind of takes your mind away from the stresses. I've talked to me and Bill Stewart. We've had a couple episodes where we talked about trauma in the reptile community and stuff. And we were talking about vets and suicide rates, and their suicide rates are like outrageous for veterinarians. Yeah. Like it's actually bad. Like suicide rate for a male in society in general public is like 3.5 to 5 times more likely than the average person, or from women. Whereas a female in the vet industry is actually 3 times more likely to commit suicide than the general public. So is she 1.5 times more likely than a man in the general public? It's very interesting how that might work, how the math works up there, but it means that their suicide rate's pretty high. And we were talking about the buddy system and how that might work, of getting people in college to where they actually had to have somebody to talk to, another vet, every month. These are things that we don't talk about, those stresses. You do need a stress reliever. He often goes over things like rescues and stuff get to a point where they're overbearing mentally with passion fatigue.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
I passion fatigue. So that was like always like a big like scary thing that people used to like say. It's like, oh, you're doing too much, you're gonna get burned out. You're doing this, you're gonna get burned out. Don't get too many animals, you're gonna get burnt out. And I do see that is a reality. I see it happens with a lot of people. In my case, like I said in the beginning of this, like I get very obsessive about the things that I like. I got into music, I got guitars, and I was like, well, now I'm going to start trading and selling and flipping guitars. And then one day in high school, I counted the guitars that I had, and I was like, how the hell did I get into 30 guitars? And I wasn't even tired of it. With the reptiles, I work a full-time job in the reptile industry. I come home, I work my business, and then I only give myself one day off. Saturday is my day off. That's the day that I spend with family. And then Sunday, I'm, working on I spend the whole day outside working on the animals that I have outside, and then I go do the podcast. Maybe I'll get burned out one day. Maybe I'll get passion fatigue, but it hasn't happened yet. It never happened with music. And I don't know, like, I think that specifically, like, honestly, with the topic of mental health, that is something that's close to my heart. And I'm not going to lie to you, a lot of it is like negative from like a mental health perspective. It's more like I try to keep my mind busy because I don't want to be alone in my mind, kind of thing.
Well, I think one of the things that's probably very helpful for you, your team.
Yes.
Does that?
I will say that this has been the fact that, as far as the podcast goes, the fact that I feel like I have shoulders to like put my head on if I need to. And that has been so important, because when I was in the band situation, it wasn't really like that. I would shoulder so much, and then I would take that out on like the other members, and it would create such a tense environment. And I know it that I'm doing that now. Back then I didn't know it. Also back then I was a kid, but now I know that I have to let go a little bit, and I'm trying to do those things. And again, super grateful for the guys that do this podcast with me, that they're always there to help out, if I need them.
So my name is Learning with a Scientist, but learning for my reptiles is actually learning science and how to deal with people for my reptiles. That's the full title. And I just shortened it to Learning for My Reptiles. And I don't think there's enough people that understand that you have to learn how to deal with people. Otherwise, how can you help the animals?
Yeah.
You're not working directly with the animals. You're working with the people that are working with the animals. So something that we talked about last time with Dylan, it's like, why there's so many people out there that are so, this snake looks like this, and this is the coolest thing because this snake's like this and this color and this color. And it's like, well, everybody that's breeding every damn thing now we don't know where the hell they're going, and rescues are being overwhelmed to where they can't actually sit here and take in every single animal. And that's a huge amount of money. That's why I actually support Dubia.com. That episode I did on the type of people that do hospice for reptiles, they were like, no, Dubia literally spent thousands of dollars on like a couple of our animals to pay their vet bills for our rescue. I'm like, no, I super support that shit. I support that all day long.
You see, the thing is that I kind of disagree with it a little bit. Not the Dubia stuff, but as far as like, you know, the wide array or the variety of animals that we have right now. You see, I don't think that that is an issue with the amount of animals. I think that that is an issue with the lack of education for the keepers that end up harming these animals and putting them into these rehabs and stuff like that, the rescues and stuff like that. The thing is that, I mean, mind you, if you're being responsible about what it is that you're breeding, you know, I mean, we have to understand that reptiles and the pet trade works like every other market in the sense that there's a supply and there's a demand. You know, the demand for a lot of species is still there. Believe it or not, even though we produce in this country a shit ton of ball pythons, the demand for ball pythons is still there, because when new people come in, 9 times out of 10, when they want to buy a pet snake, they're trying to buy that ball python, and there needs to be supply for that if we're thinking about it in, you know, in a supply chain point of view. Mind you, on the other end, we have animals like you know, our giant animals, you know, like reticulated pythons, Burmese pythons, etc. Where, I mean, I'm not against somebody breeding them, but it's like, should we breed them to the numbers that we are breeding them? Because, like, man, they fucking have a lot of babies. You know, I was surprised when I went to my first out-of-state show that I was like, damn, like, you know, the shows that I'm used to seeing a shit ton of ball pythons. Now I'm just seeing a shit ton of reticulated pythons everywhere. This is crazy, you know. And to think about, like, some of these animals are going to get, you know, 15 feet plus. Like, who can handle that, you know? Mind you, there are keepers that can, you know, but the wide variety, or I would say the majority of keepers cannot, you know. So we have to think within the community and kind of self-regulate ourselves, like what, you know, the topic of should is difficult, because, like, we have free will. We live in a free country. You can do what you need to do as long as it fits our, you know, the laws, you know, but we should kind of have some self-regulation with some of the
I see it even bigger than that. We can't just keep looking at the community, because we've seen how that's done. I've made I explained politics from like an actual world politics viewpoint and stuff, and to understand that we need to raise the pocketbook of the American people to get us out of this mindset of survival, so that we can inform them into a mindset of actually taking care of shit.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother thing that we actually, as a community, do need to get into. And so we do need to actually find politicians that actually want that particular issues solved, which is super hard to find.
I think, so you said you think bigger. And I say, I think smaller. And this is what I mean. I mean that I am, first off, like, I don't like politics. Like, politics, I don't fuck with. Like, I think that personally, maybe I shouldn't even say what I'm about to say, but I don't think, like, these people in power care about, you know, people like me. Like, that's the truth.
That's not
like,
controversial.
I'm
never be
insignificant.
Controversial.
Yeah, I am insignificant to the people of power. You know, I'm a 5'2" Hispanic man, you know, like, both of my parents are Hispanic, contrary to what I look like physically. You know, I am first generation American, you know, like, both of my parents immigrated to this country. And, you know, man, I forgot I know what I was on about. I don't think that it's about the people that are in power today more than the people that are in power tomorrow. So my concern is that whenever I'm at these reptile shows, whenever I am talking to these people, whenever I am, you know, even doing some of these podcasts, and I'm just like, I'm giving some kind of value to either the kid that's buying the animal, the parent, or the young keeper, because those are the people that are gonna run our country one day.
Yeah,
So if
no,
those people are,
yeah.
if we're able to reach as many of those people as possible, only positive things are going to change. And that's why you'll see that, like, even today in quote unquote government, like more quote unquote
I don't
progressive
think
people are
that's a
getting
little
it.
thought. I think that's actually a big thought.
The biggest thought.
It
Oh, the
really
littlest
is.
guy with the biggest thought.
I actually, on my Facebook page, my favorite quote is from Max Planck. He is the physicist that Einstein looked up to. Planck constant is like the smallest. It's the measurement of the smallest thing, just period. Anything that's the smallest, it's Planck constant. And so,
Planck constant.
yeah, it's his quote is scientific idea does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but in the fact that their opponents eventually die and the next generation grows up with the idea.
Gotcha.
I'm like, that's exactly how it works.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I get a lot of surprisingly, Bill Strand actually didn't like my idea. Phil Gross didn't like it.
Of what?
Of my idea that what we need to do is create a licensing system, but not like, oh, well, you got to license every single animal. No, you have to learn the basics. You have to take a test. State of Utah, I've interviewed a few state herpetologists. The state of Utah requires you to take a test before you can pull anything out of the wild, before you can actually own anything that's there.
I don't think that's far off.
No.
Mind you, I think it's
how it's done.
I'm going to give you the answer from a business point of view first. From a business point of view, like, you are kind of risking losing the customer because you're like, damn, like, you want to spend $300 with me, but also I'm going to test you. They're going to be like, I don't want this. But in the long term, maybe that'll help the health of the animal, because then you could correct the people and what they think that they need for their animal. You can correct it right there at the source, right at the beginning. The thing is that Tino actually, he had mentioned something similar. And also, I have a friend, his name is Stefan. He does surveys in the Everglades. And Stefan, when we worked together at a reptile shop in Miami, he wanted to implement like just like a 5-question thing when somebody wants to buy, their first animal. Like, hey, what does this animal need? What does this, that? What does that, this? The problem is that at the end of the day, like, that gives some kind of friction to the sale. So therefore, most businesses wouldn't want to do that. But that's kind of one of the things that sparked, and I know that, like, we had messaged and you said that you liked our quote unquote KFC idea. So that's one of the things that kind of sparked that conversation. Originally, if I can just delve into that, originally the whole KFC thing happened from a
what is KFC real quick?
Okay, so KFC stands for Keepers for Conservation. Okay, the way that this happened was, first off, it was a joke. It was a joke in the sense that it was like, we were talking about Chuck and Tino's opinion about what USARK and USARK Florida are doing and how they don't agree with it, and how FWC is going to just go ahead and pass all these laws in Florida because in the end of the day, they have a lot of the right to do that and more power than the reptile community does. The problem is that Tino could not say FWC. He could not say FWC that episode. He kept fucking it up and saying KFC. So every time he wanted to say FWC, he would say KFC. So eventually I was like, Tino, who the fuck is KFC? And from there, we're thinking about it. We're like, what if KFC stood for Keepers for Conservation? And then we likened that idea to the fact that hunters, even though they are killing animals in the wild, they have to give money to an organization, and this is stuff that Chuck had explained to me. I'm not very familiar with it, so I'm just kind of like word vomit what I thought that he was trying to say. There's an organization that hunters donate money to, that money goes to conservation. So when laws try to get passed, when like PETA comes around and stuff like that, and they're like, oh, we want to stop the hunting, that organization is like, well, look, this is all the money that we donate to conservation. So you stop this situation, we're not conserving shit. So we're like, damn, what if we were able to actually figure out a way to have an organization where keepers can go and we can hold ourselves responsible, self-regulate, have like a set of like standards to be a part of this organization where we can raise some money and we can, really work on conservation projects and stuff like that. Like that was the idea. And like, it was something that just in the past like year, honestly, has just been in passing. And I can't really like speak so much more about it specifically because we are working on the project now.
Great. This is what my thought was. This was because I'm from Missouri. I'm in Missouri, and Missouri actually has a tax that goes straight to the conservation for our FWC, and so that's really good. And they do actually use it. And I know some people here think that they're overpowered, but yet we do actually have. And I question this too: do we have really great protection because of our FWC, or do we have great protection because the lands here get so flooded? We actually have several towns here, like 3 or 4 towns that have 0 occupancy because of flooding. So that's very interesting if one or the other, if one led to conservation because of the other, it's very interesting. But if we actually made a test and it was, what's humidity? What's, air temperature versus surface temperature? All these basic stuff. How do you get rid of your animal properly? What's, all these different things like that. What's captive bred versus wild caught? What's, basic stuff that you absolutely should know before getting any exotic, and then make them pay $20. So it's an affordable cost. But it doesn't go to the reptile community. It goes to the state herpetologists, the state conservation stuff. And then you don't actually punish the people who get animals. You punish the people who sell them. So it's a fine. So this would actually educate people more to where they wouldn't buy the stuff at PetSmart and Petco so easily. And so therefore PetSmart and Petco would actually have to raise their value of their products as well. Yeah. So there's something there, I think. And and it's not to like, because I know that like USARK and USARK Florida, they have their own stance on conservation. And it's not to say that that they're doing anything wrong or they're doing anything bad. Personally, I do see the point of an organization that is in charge of helping us through like laws that are passing. USARK and USARK Florida, USARK Florida here in Florida and USARK in the broader country. I mean, those are the organizations that are doing those things. So I see necessity in that. Mind you, I have no opinion about how they spend their money. Some people do. I don't. I'm more against like a lot of the outside people that have like the cult mentality, like that if you can't donate 20% of your sales to USARK, it's like we should ban you, But mind you, 20% of 100 is $20, and then you only have $80. It's sometimes it's difficult. It doesn't always make sense, kind of thing. Regardless, but the main key that I'm trying to say there is that USARK, specifically the only organization that does that, okay, and they cannot allocate all their money to conservation because their money is for, more importantly, the laws and those things that are passing. So what if we just had an organization made for keepers that we can, on one side, kind of like self-regulate like some keeping standards.
and then on the other side, like through this awareness, create a demand and have another organization, but instead of like you donating money for organization, you're donating money for instead of you donating money for donations for these laws, it's like you're also like trying to just help the environment, and I don't think that personally, I mean, again, like these are things that are so in the infancy of this project that we're working on. Like I don't even think that we're going to be taking in money or like taking in donations to whatever Keepers for Conservation is, more than it's going to be like a middleman. Yeah. I think at the end of the day,
I have a higher understanding of politics than most people will ever have. It was something that I talked with Daniel Parker on our second episode. Like I did like a 2 hour.
Sorry, I needed one really quick. I just want to clarify one thing because I realized something that I said sounded wrong real quick. When I say we're not taking in money through the organization, I'm not saying that we're not taking monies and putting it in our pocket. I'm saying like literally the organization probably wouldn't even take money more than we would middleman, like through awareness, like say, hey, we're working with this organization. This is where you donate for that organization, or this, like this project, this like the OCIC needs this. Like we're gonna raise awareness for that. Like I guess like that's kind of like where we would probably go in that direction, especially to start, because we're not gonna be just taking in money, and it's weird. Things get finicky with that. Anyways, continue.
Despite if anybody actually hates you, that's actually the reason why I was more than happy to have you on, because you guys do come across as legit and actually like as weird and controversial as you guys might get. Sometimes I actually am like, yeah, I'm like okay with the fact that like I do all of this for free. Like I am not making a dime. I am actually spending a dime. I am actually creating stuff that is useful for everything. And even if it doesn't get out to the public, I've got to, there's a vet tech for a high school student class here in St. Louis. After putting on the empathy and trauma episode with Bill, she actually wrote me and wanted us to come talk to her class about this topic. And I just mentioned how terrible it is, the suicide rates for vets. So this is actually something that I would do for free just to help out the thing. Like that's what it sounds like what you're doing, and that's why I can have this massive respect. But I also understand that we need to bring in money. It's not just
yeah.
And
it's hard because it's just like I feel like the thing that's difficult is like the crossroads is there. Some people are going to be short on money, and they're going to have the conversation with themselves like, should I donate money to like an organization like USARC that fights for our laws, or should I donate the money direct to conservation? And that's like a conversation within itself. It's difficult, and these are kinks that we need to like
here's
work
the bigger
out.
picture of all of that. I've come to this conclusion a while back, and it really frustrates me. Every time I see the stuff that we need done in this world, that we actually need the positive stuff to happen, it's like they have no money. And every single thing that is capable of harming the world in general has all the money. And it's like, it's really interesting that is how everything has come about. It's like conservation doesn't have enough money. It's like, well, that rescue doesn't have enough money, but the fossil fuel has a lot of money. It's like, I know that's political and stuff, but still, like, it's very interesting how we don't have money for the things that we actually need.
Yeah.
And it's one reason why I am actually thinking about running for some sort of government, because I'm fed up. Like, it's like we have to get somebody in office that is not corrupt, that will actually fight back, and I will literally beat the shit out of somebody because I am so sick of just hearing some of the stupidest shit. And it's like people like talking about Dylan and they're like, oh, well, Dylan's just pushing his opinion. It's like, no, Dylan had the best people in the world on his podcast. His opinion is based on actual conversations with some of the smartest people in the hobby, in the industry.
If you break down, to go a little bit outside of reptiles, if you break down like Joe Rogan, for example, and Joe Rogan is so like politicized, but whatever. If you break down like Joe Rogan today versus Joe Rogan when he started podcasting, like he is the person that he is today because of all the information that he took in, because he was so willing to take in other people's perspective, because he was so willing to listen to people. That's the most important part of the conversation is the listening aspect. Dylan specifically, mind you, our style of podcast is very different from the Animals at Home style, but Tino, that's his favorite podcast. His favorite reptile podcast is the Animal at Home podcast because it's the one that offers the most value because of that. Because something that's happening with Dylan in real time is exactly what happened with Joe Rogan, where he's having all these people on. He's able to come up with all these kinds of opinions, and I respect a lot specifically what he's doing because he is doing the most important part of the conversation. He's listening. What the three of us do is, for the most part, fuck around and make jokes, so that way, like, while you're listening to our podcast through a day that might be mundane, maybe we can make you smile a little bit. Maybe we can offer you some kind of value through that. And then when we are able to have guests on, we are able to get these kinds of opinions, but with what Dylan does, I think it's very special. I think he is the best at that craft. I had him on our podcast. We do very, very few of this style of podcast just because like it's hard to keep for me, like the same production. It's a little bit unfamiliar with me. So when we had him on the podcast, we talked a little bit about the KFC thing. We likened it to another idea that he had. And it was a great conversation. He's a great dude. I hope that one day I can shake his hand in person. I respect what he's doing a lot.
Yeah, actually, no, Dylan, I actually consider him a friend. You'll have to check out that episode. It's actually pretty good. I get into neuroscience. It's actually I have neuroscience episodes that I've been doing, but they're not linear. They're not cohesive as you would want for most of the audience, but I was just trying to get episodes out since I've been in this, armed stuff. So, but going back to something I was talking about, in the state of Missouri, do you know how? Well, I know you don't know how, but the state actually, the people voted. They actually had a ballot initiative to raise taxes for conservation in Missouri. It was a ballot initiative, so it was actually put in place by the people. Yeah. And what's wild about that is, so we have tax here for conservation directly to add extra to it, and federal governments will actually match people like that, match the state's conservation's funds. Yeah. And so one thing that you do have in Florida, you do have that. I've looked into it, and it's pretty wild. You need 25% of the counties. You need 25% of 25% of the counties is what it is. And that gets you a council seat. Like, you become a council. Then from there, you need like 25% more or something of the state. And then you actually get it on the ballot. And then from there, this is where it gets into trouble. Is they raise the threshold because you have to have at least 1% of the last presidential election amount so the amount of people that voted in the last presidential election, the amount of people that actually have to check a box on that particular law has to be 1% of that at minimum. So then that 1% means that you have to get 61% of that And that's where the problem is at 61%. So no, I was thinking of stuff like you guys could actually, because it's still, as long as it's not costing the state money, it is legal. And this was before Ron DeSanchez. They just made it to where it was higher to that threshold to get it passed. So you guys could actually get somebody else on the board of FWC possible. There's actually a possibility to do that kind of stuff. And so
that'd be difficult. I mean, honestly.
And the amount of money. And then what's going to happen is they're going to say, no, you can't do that. Because here in Missouri, we actually had a ballot initiative to do ranked choice voting. And we got the signatures. They literally, the state senators here are like, well, the people here are too stupid to understand that. No, you check 1, 2, 3. It's not rocket science. And so then what they did was then the state, I can't think of what it is now, but like the state auditor, the state secretary, or whoever is over elections actually said that the signatures were not, like, all the signatures weren't correct. So the more people that move around, the harder it would to do this, because you can't have to have people that actually have a address here that is well known as the address that they're from. So you can't have any type of that. Otherwise, they'll just mark it as wrong. So they cast it out and said, you guys, we're not going to put that on the ballot because of that. And we see these ballot initiatives everywhere, but Florida has it. And you'll end up having to take it to court, and they'll do that. Once again, we talk about what we actually need. We'll have trouble funding. Even though the law's there.
Yeah, it's tough, man.
But it's an
tough,
idea.
Man. And I feel like in a certain sense, I should probably be a little bit more educated on those kinds of things. But my truth is, I think that I have and this is just like a personal thing, I just think that I have very little power over a lot of things. I don't know how well my voice can be heard. So I've always put my attention to like little projects that can potentially make some kind of impact. Yeah. So, and I know that I know that because I can get so obsessive about things, I have to be very careful about what I put my time into, because I make it my whole life. I literally have for the first time in years, I have a hobby that I have not tried to monetize. I have thought about monetizing, and I have to stop myself, because everything for me is always like, well, anything that I have to do has to have a purpose. It's never like you can just do this for fun, so I do have to be careful a little bit with the things that I put my mind into. And right now that we're starting to work on whatever this KFC idea is going to be, hopefully through that, it can become bigger things. But as far as like the political side of it and what's going on here in Florida, like, I know that most of what I can do is very little, or rather, why
I said reach out to me if you guys want help with something, because I'm more than happy to help. And it's these, like you said, it's the listening, it's the little talks, it's the things. I don't know who I might have had an impact on. So if I go to talk to that class of high schoolers of the vet tech, who knows of that one class, the impact that I would actually have on the world as a whole. Like you can't see that chaos as it moves through. You just have to put it out there in the ether and go, okay, let's hope this at least does something for one person at least.
Yeah, and I think it's that, like, one of my favorite things, and I really don't mean it in like a narcissistic way, but we all
know you.
No, but it's like I really do enjoy when people come up to me at like the reptile shows, and like either they recognize me from like an Instagram post, or they recognize me from like the podcast, and not because it makes me feel good that I'm recognized, more than it's just like I hope that whatever like thing that I'm putting out there offered you some kind of value. There are these two kids specifically that go to the Repticon in Georgia that they are starting their like breeding business. Their dad is helping them find direction. Like they are starting like a YouTube, so they wanted to film my table. So the first time I went to the show, I was like, yeah, whatever you want to ask me, like we'll have a conversation, whatever, like because I knew it was important to those kids that they were doing that, and like they needed to be met with open arms. And then the next time that I saw them at the next Repticon in Georgia, like they were really excited to see me and have a conversation. Oh, do you remember me? Whatever. I was like, of course I remember you. Like, like this community is small. So like you can make big impact on like very few things. And then like locally, when people are like, oh yeah, I heard this on the podcast, or they start becoming part of the joke. There's a guy here that we call him Eddie Soto. We call him the local legend. And it was a joke that we made on the podcast, and it has like grown way past the podcast. So like now at reptile shows, like if I'm with Eddie and we're talking, and then it's like, oh, it's the local, like people pass by, it's the local legend, it's whatever. It's become part of the joke. And like those kinds of things like mean a lot to me, because that little voice that I might have, the little voice that maybe got to you and hopefully offered some kind of value or made you smile or whatever, sappy things that I'm trying to say.
That's actually a very positive thing. I don't know how much time that you have or want to.
Gotcha. Yeah, we can start wrapping it up if you want.
Okay. Yeah, no. One of the times that I was at a show, there was a kid I have some friends that actually, shout out to Reptile Rumbles up here in St. Louis. The kid was up there and he just kept on and on and on. Venomous. Every word out of his mouth was venomous, 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 venomous. Me and my buddy, we were outside and we saw the venomous and venomous. It was like, oh my God. It just, at some point I'm like, we don't care about venomous here. Okay, stop. You see that snake? He had a python on his finger, and that python was like sniffing the air. And I was like, "You see that python right there? That python is comfortable with you. You see his behavior? He's so comfortable with you. That's really cool. Like I like that. Like that's cool to me."
I do think, so certain types of reptiles, I feel, offer people like some kind of like badge of honor. I feel that way about like a lot of venomous people, a lot of people that have big monitors, big snakes, people that work in crocodilians. So, some of those people wear their work with a badge of honor, and to a certain degree, like I can respect that because it's such like a dangerous thing, but also like it doesn't need to be the thing that makes you cooler than somebody who works with leopard geckos. Like the thing that we all got to remember in the end of the day is that we are such a niche community. Like we can't like expect class when we're just a bunch of nerds playing with animals. Like we are the outcasts, no matter what it is that you're working with. Like this is the reality of the situation. So we should just have fun with it.
And see, I used to take my dragons out for a walk. I actually outfitted a stroller when I lived in the apartment because there was nowhere to take them outside to get them sun. Yeah. So I went down to the local lake and we would just walk around the lake. Yeah. And one day that I didn't have the stroller yet, I had them in totes. And I have 3 beardies, and the guy comes over and goes, oh, they're just bearded dragons. Yeah, I used to have a savanna monitor and an iguana. Yeah. Yeah, okay. I'm like, yeah, they're awesome. They're so individualized. It's like, I can sit here and tell you when I had surgery, I wanted to make sure my animals were taken care of. So therefore, because it's minor surgery for my wrist. I was in and out that day, but if something happened during surgery, I mean, it's still a surgery. And so it's like I talked to my local rescue, the Three Sisters, and I'm like, dude, this is how you break into my house and get my animals if I don't contact you back within this certain amount of time. This is how it's done. And she's like, yeah, we'll do that for you. Hopefully it goes well. We'll say a prayer for you. And then I explained every single one of my animals and their personalities. And it's like, I have a blind Peter Bandit skink. When you throw friggin' worms to him, make sure it ends up under his nose and he'll grab it immediately. I have, the Emerald Swiss. It's like my Savannah monitors are like this. My Beardy Dragon Pitch the bitch is independent. She needs more stimulation. Hydra gets depressed and loves sitting in windows and swimming. She loves swimming. And this kind of shit, she goes, dude, I was crying. Because this rescue, all they see all day is usually the bad shit. So to have somebody in their life that's actually caring about the animal so deeply that they understand the individual personality of every single one of their animals, she's just like, I was in tears. It's just awesome. And that's the thing. It means something to some people, but it means nothing to others. It's really sad.
I'm sure one day we'll get to a place where people will be more willing to be accepting, be able to have conversations, be able to take a new perspective, and through the podcast, I think that is the goal in the end of the day. Through the podcast, it's about showing people that, hey, we can have these conversations. We get messages, whenever we let out those clips, to promote the podcast, Chuck will get messages complaining about either Tino or me, why did they have this opinion? It's so dumb. And then I get messages oh my God, Chuck's so annoying. And then Tino gets messages yo, fucking this shit's crazy, and the point is that we've opened that conversation. So you're either watching us because you want to make fun of us and we're a bunch of clowns to you, or you're watching us because you like to have fun. But you're watching, if you are, you're watching.
Yeah. I don't have too many trolls, but it's funny when you do get trolls. But I had one, and he was telling me how I couldn't be a scientist because I'm so incoherent. And then when I had the state herpetologist from Missouri on, we had hellbenders. We were talking about him. And the guy misspelled hellbenders and made some incohesive joke as if I was stupid or something. And it's wow, that's that's what a troll, that's really, that was quite sad. But I do think about this stuff, and one of the things that I always think about is how do people see this? And I know how people are going to see me. I'm actually psychological friendly, to where I get that not everybody's going to be happy with my incoherencies, and so that's always why I wanted a guest host. But I actually I try to head stuff off at the pass. So, when I do the neuroscience stuff, one of the first things that I said was, it's something I said about Liam and his conversations about racks and how they actually basically deplete the brains of pythons. And it's no, if you can prove that wrong, if you can prove that the neurons don't work like we know neurons work, because there is no difference in neurons between an animal and a person. So if you can prove that wrong, then go get your Nobel Prize. And if you're telling me, well, you don't need a Nobel Prize, no, that's millions of dollars right there. Go get your Nobel Prize because you could use millions of dollars. Who can't use millions of dollars? Yeah. And don't come back at me telling me that I need to go get a Nobel Prize because I'm just talking about basic science. And you don't get Nobel Prizes for knowing basic science.
Yeah, that rack conversation is funny. The rack conversation is funny because it's you can put them in a rack, in a tote or whatever, or you could put them in a PVC, but it's just your plastic is just a little bit bigger than mine. Mind you, I think that we do need to evolve as a community a bit. I am somebody that has these racks, a lot of them. I mean, not a lot, but most of my stuff, maybe most of my stuff's in racks. Um, thing is that we need to figure out the reality. The reality is that when you run a business, you need to watch your overhead. You need to maximize the usage of your space. But what we need to also understand is that we can't just look at these animals as commodities. They are not assets. They are liabilities. They are alive. They eat, breathe, and shit. And we should offer the best that we can because they are providing us a living. Therefore, if we can offer better caging, we should try to put the effort in improving the caging. Something that I did at Daytona this year was have a conversation with a rack manufacturer, one of the metal rack manufacturers, and I told him, I was like, hey, have you considered making these racks, like there's this much space between them, the levels are just about this. You can't really see it because my green screen thing is on. What if we doubled that size, and even though the rack will be taller, maybe you might have 2 levels less, but if you double that size, change the top where you would be able to have lights, your specifically UV lights for some of the snakes, where I think that, I mean, some people say you need it, some people say you don't. But in the end of the day, these animals are outside. Something is needed there. And I think that if we're able to figure out just a way to put some lighting, those kinds of racks will be better even for like some species of lizard. A little bit of a bigger bin, a deeper bin, offer it natural UV, boom, better. With snakes, maybe if you can put like a low output UV, whatever it is, just figure out a way to make it make a little bit more sense. Because at the end of the day, the mainstream media comes in, the mainstream people, the people that are outside of the community come in, and they see that and they are confused. I don't know how many times I've had to have conversations with like people in like my family that see that and they're like, wait, that's what you do, like that. But then when I go and I take them into one of my couple like outside cages or my turtle ponds or my backyard filled with tortoises, it's just like, oh wait, that makes more sense to what it is that you're doing. Like, this is nice. And like, that's the way that like people on the outside look at it from the inside. So we need to have a better image so that way people are more accepting of what it is that we do.
And that's one reason why I don't show a lot of my enclosures and stuff, because they don't look that fancy. Like, they're so basic in a way. Like, it's like I'll use a dollar bowl and just flip it over or something because I want it functional so the animal will actually enjoy it, and I want it cheap. So I have to put more creativity into it. And I do have studies in nonverbal human communication so I can understand animal communication and stuff. I learned a lot, but it's very fascinating. I also add a UVA light, a grow light, to almost every one of my tanks, and every single animal that I have will use it, and they'll use it separate to the UVB. But then every one of my enclosures also has space for them to get completely away from them.
Yeah,
it's very fascinating. Something like that, because
I just think that there's a lot more room to improve, and we just don't have to stay stuck to what was before. Out of an example, when I got into breeding blue tongues, all the successful breeders in Florida, they bred them in racks. They said they didn't really need UV. They said that if you give them the right amount of calcium, you're dodging the MBD thing. You might get some tail kinks. You might get some this, and then I met Heather and Ron from Fairy Tale Dragons. And they were like, hey, come on over. Let's have a conversation. Just come look at the way that we keep our blue tongues. And, you hold them. They act different. They feel different. They have different muscle strength. They have different just everything in general. And I was like, wait, this is what they need to fucking be. Like, yeah, I mean, the animals in the racks are living, but they're not thriving. And I realized I was just like, I need to, start experimenting, putting some of these things outside. And my climate is very similar to them. I don't live far from them. I have a similar ground from them, and even though like, it's over 30 minutes away, it's still possible to do it. It's not too far off as far as the climate. Right. So, I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, these, it worked breeding blue tongues in racks, but that is not what the animal actually needs. I think that it kind of harms the animal in the long run. So now, like, even the ones that I'm keeping indoors, I'm not going to put them in PVC enclosures, but I'm going to keep them in a different style of rack that can offer them more space, deeper bin, UV and heat. Like these are long-term plans, mind you. Then people are like, well, if you had less animals, you need to have less space. Or right, if you had less animals, you could offer them more space and whatever. But people also need to understand that, you know, we're already in the hole, and we need to make those movements little by little. If not, we get into bankruptcy conversations, and people have families, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, so we need to be more realistic about some of these expectations that some people want to have.
And when you talk to rescues and stuff, they try not to be judgmental because it doesn't help. And that's the kicker right there. It's the episode Dylan did with Trap Talk, and the guy in the comment during the live session's like, oh, well, these guys they're just pushing their opinions, and they're always telling, you know, they're already telling me this. It's like telling you that you're a terrible person for keeping in racks. It's like, I don't understand what you're saying there, because that hasn't even come up on the podcast yet. So no, that's where my problems are, is that person's being actually judgmental, even though they're believing that other people, and that's probably comes from social media, because we can't be as judgmental on people. We have to actually go, okay, I don't like this, but I can't get mad at you. It's how can I help you?
Yeah, the blue tongue skink, a couple years ago, before the pandemic, the blue tongue skink community was very much like that. It was very hard to get in because you got instantly met with friction. I mean, when I got into it, it was like that. You know, it was like, how do you not know the lineage of this animal going back to the great grandparents, like so close to Australia, kind of thing. Like, you know, and then somebody would come in and they bought like an Indonesian skink and they got misled, or it's, you know, then they get yelled at because it's wild caught. You're not going to keep it correctly. Not like, oh, let me teach you how to keep it correctly. It's, you're not going to do it. You're stupid for doing it. Like, why would you do this? Why would you do that? Just like, yo, like, that attitude, that those people killed the blue tongue skink community, killed the blue tongue market. They killed it for a lot of people, you know. But what we found out during the pandemic is that a lot of those people pulled out of blue tongues because they couldn't sell their blue tongues anymore because they brought negativity to that community, you know. So those kinds of things I've learned phase out.
That's exactly it. It's like when we talk about Bill Strand, you know who he is. Most people know who he is. His follower base is not that big, but they're there. They're loyal because he actually puts the effort forth. And most people don't really want necessarily that, but then the people that do are loyal because that's what they want, that loyalty.
I think that we also have that a little bit with the podcast. Like we have a decent like community in the sense that like we have like our own like Facebook group. The Reptile is called Reptiles with Squad. So that's like for like people that just listen to the podcast that like, you know, we have that there if we ever want to have conversations and stuff like that. But like we always get a lot of the like comments from the same people, and like they're familiar with the jokes, they're familiar with the thing, and like that's real cool when you can have that community, and you guys can all just be friends, you know. Like, you know, I through the podcast, through like a friendship with Chuck, I met a buddy of mine that's going to be helping me with my outdoor blue tongue enclosures, and it's just like, dude, like just these little connections, like we build a stronger community, we do these things, you know, which will only help the future.
Yeah, and I don't have any blue tongues, but I've held one, and it's super similar to a Peter Banded skink. But I love, they are my favorite reptile. And I think the quote for a Peter Banded skink, what somebody said is, they are the absolute best pet lizard you'll never see. That's
funny.
Yes. Yeah. It's like, it's true.
I call, not to give offense to your bearded dragons, but I say that blue tongue skinks are the superior pet lizard. Blue tongue skinks are the best pet lizard. They're much more forgiving. They're much less needy.
I actually think if we can get Peter Banded skinks to breed more in captivity, they would even be probably superior because you can cohab. They're smaller, and they're literally the same exact attitudes on almost every. Well, they're not.
I disagree with it. I disagree with it because they're a little bit more particular and they hide the majority of the time. Where a blue tongue does burrow, but they are just very active. They're super personable. And the best thing is the key to, in my opinion, to a species that's going to hit the mainstream is the availability of color mutations. Because the thing is that then they become, then they have a gimmick. You know, they're like, oh, like I got this one because I'm really into the color yellow. I got this one because I like better contrast. I got this one because of the pattern. I got this one because I like red. You know, so they hit the mainstream like that. You know, for like the private keepers, the people that are much more like hobbyists, they pick the animal because they like the animal. But if we're trying to get it to the mainstream so that way the majority of people like the thing, like the color variations need to be there.
Yeah, you're right. And that's something that, you know, I've got, like I said, I've got studies in friggin' polymer chemistry focused on medical tech, like studying DNA and stuff like that. That's fine. Like, and so for me, it's weird how all the breeders out there, even the biologist ones and everybody, you guys are all, the color, the morphs. And I'm sitting here going, you guys are usually talking about it as numbers, as, oh, well, the breeder will get this percentage and this percentage and this percent. And I have math degrees, I have physics degrees and stuff. But yet when I see morphs, all I think about is genetics. And I'm going to eventually do some episodes on morphs and how they affect the brain, because it is interesting, and it's not necessarily like the ball python, the spider, how it's actually the ear canal. Even though snakes don't have ears, they still have some remnants in their skull, and that right there somehow affects it to where that creates that problem. Yeah. I'll get into those in some of my neurological episodes and stuff.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I think that you know, yeah, I see only positive things for the future. I know things are going to be rough, but you know.
Yeah, there's so little money. But yet, it's like the Peter Banded skinks. My plan is to breed them. Actually, take 3 years to study their actual growth rate, and then we'll think about selling. I want to know more science of them so we can put it out there. Because I'm one of the only people in the world that I know that can sex a Peter Banded skink by sight. Like I can actually do that. It's weird, right? It's like when you see it, the buddy of mine, he was actually writing a book. It's the head to hip ratio. The head ratio for most males are closer to 1.25, while the females are more of 1. And when I would go to shows, I would forget my tape measure, so I would take my key. And there was one like younger one that I seen that's like, okay, so this is the weight, this is the size. Okay, so I can't. This isn't very good to determine. Well, it looks like a girl. And I took the key and I measured the head to hip ratio. I'm like, oh shit, no, that's a boy. That shit where you're getting this much of that key and then the hips are like this. And it's like, yeah, no, that's a boy. That's a boy. The other one that I got that same day was a girl and it's like, oh yeah, no, this is identical head to hip ratio. And it's so interesting. And I've actually had feedback on Facebook and stuff how I can't do that and I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And then when it comes to actually helping them, I'm like, no, you see those marks on that thing that everybody else is like, oh, it's a boy, it's a girl. It's like, no, that marks, that's bad substrate. That thing's blistering because of the bad substrate. And everybody else is like, boy, girl, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, you guys don't even actually think about the care of the animals. You're just thinking about this little thing over here. The bigger pictures is pretty wild to think about. It's not, oh, wow, all the naturalistic stuff's great. It's not necessary, but it does make us look better. And it has potential, but something I talked about with Dylan, about his gecko. His gecko's so used to him and the glass, and the geckos and anoles, they have the things on their fingers to touch, to actually stick to stuff on a molecular level. So that's why they can understand glass, whereas most of the other animals can't, because that molecular bond, so they know that bond is there. They know that thing actually exists.
Yeah.
And the comfort due to the limited amount of the brain on memory, that gecko been there for 13 years. He knows what glass is, and then he gives him this big leaves in the back that have shade. He doesn't know what's in that shade, but he knows that glass is safe because he's been on glass for 13 years. It's like, yeah, it's interesting. And looking at it like that, like the individual animals, people don't think about that either.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, what's your thoughts? Any takeaways? Anything that you learned, you thought people should know from this podcast? Anything you want to say about yours?
Well, it's early. You got to start your morning with the Reptiles with coffee. Oh, you can't even see it. Oh, look, there it is. Hell yeah.
Reptiles with coffee.
Yeah, Reptiles with coffee. No, but for real. Yeah, no, I think that, I guess, without sounding like an asshole, but like the message always is just be able to be in the same room with your opposition, be able to take in perspective, be able to take in information with open arms. Listen, I always like, I used to beat myself up about like not, being part of a conversation. Like, oh, why didn't I speak? Why didn't I, I should have said something, like I should have spoken and I should have, whatever. But then I realized, I'm like, no, dude, like, it's okay to be quiet and listen. Like, it's okay to be the quietest person in the room. Like, usually the quietest person in the room is the one that took in the most information, because they're just listening to perspectives. And then, you could form your opinion, and then you could be the person, talking in some aspects. It's crazy how different, the way that I think about just the broader community is now because of how long we've been doing this podcast and all the people that I've been able to meet and the conversations that I've been able to have, and how I feel more confident in myself and my opinions today because of that.
Right.
And I wish that upon everybody. Everybody
Yes.
should be able to have a voice. Everybody should, be able to be confident in the things that they want to do. And obviously, like, you don't have to be conventional to find a place in the world. I've never been the most conventional person. Like I said, like, first generation American, I'm 5'2", I'm little, I got my tattoos. Like, I was the guy that just always figured out a way to follow his dream and make it so that way, I could make a living, between music and now Reptiles. Like, just keep doing your thing, like, you don't gotta give in, you don't gotta conform. Just, believe in yourself, surround yourself with people that offer you something. Hell yeah.
Yeah, actually, I had an intellectual bully in college, and he will go on to become a professor. The whole school treated him like he was brilliant. I would never hire that dude, ever. I would actually beat the shit out of him before hiring him. He was just, he treated me like I was stupid, but yet in class he would ask questions, and after class, because I didn't really care about his damn opinion, he was an idiot. Even though he was book smart, there's nothing I could learn from him that I couldn't go to a library and learn. Every time he would ask a question in class, the teacher would go, well, that's more advanced. It's not for this class. And I would go up to the teacher afterwards and go, this is the answer to that question that he asked, right? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, wow, really? Okay. And so it's really fascinating to think about who he is now. Like, what kind of professor he's going to be. He's going to be a terrible professor because you can break everybody down to one question. What makes them feel self-important? And when you put him into that category, his self-importance is tied into being the smartest in the room, being the most educated, because that's the way people have treated him all his life. It's the reason why you don't necessarily tell kids often that they're intelligent. You say you're hardworking. They'll actually work harder because that's what they believe other people respect in them. That's actually a study that was done. And so with him, he can't let anybody be better than him. So he will always be a terrible professor. He can never let somebody be better, because then his self-importance, is he actually important if there's somebody out there smarter than him? So if you're like me and it's, oh, well, I want to learn. You know how easy it is to learn shit? Putting my self-importance into learning? Shit, I learn shit all the time. And I'm so much happier because I can say, no, my self-importance in learning. And that's the kicker right there. What actually, you sound like, even though you talked a little bit about the struggles with your mental health a little bit, you still sound like you're happy, but you have people around you because you're willing to be open, you're willing to this, and these people work with you. So you feel like you're achieving something more. Your self-importance has to be pretty high in just the fact that you feel like you're achieving something, even a little bit, with people that actually care about you and care about what you're doing.
Yeah, I'd say that it's definitely higher than it used to be. It's not as high as I'd want it to be, but the person that I am today is a result of the work that I've put in, and it took a lot of work to even start putting in work. But it's like, you know, I had a conversation, and this is a little personal, but I had a conversation with my mom. She's struggling with some stuff, you know, and she's like, oh, but you're able to do that. You know, like, I can't do that. And I'm like, no, Mom, like, you can do that. You know, I only say that because I thought I couldn't do that. And then I had to put in the work, and I know what struggle you're going through because I am you're my mom, you know, so I know what's in your head because I have it. And I know you can get better because I am currently figuring out ways to be better. So, yeah, that's that.
Yeah, and so if you look at the difference between me and that guy now, that guy's miserable. That guy will never be happy, that intellectual bully. He can't. Because to be happy, he would have to let go of being smarter than everybody else. And so it's really fascinating, and that's what we get to here is I think that's a really great way to leave off.
Yeah.
Is that stick yourself into something that is achievable. Even relationships, I tell people, like, the best thing you can do, it's one thing that my dad has in his relationship right now. His wife, when he met her, she was driving a minivan that was basically breaking down, and now she's driving a freaking Trailhawk. He didn't buy that for her. He supported her enough to where she was able to support and go on to buy that herself, to where her self-esteem went from here to here through self-achievement through his help.
Yeah.
And so when you actually get that, it's wonderful, and that's how you become happier. That's how you get to be non-judgmental, is literally putting yourself in a position that your self-importance is tied into something that is achievable.
Yeah, and I think that the realm of achieving, as far as like I go, can be very different, just because like I've lived such an unconventional life. You know, obviously most of my friends, you know, they did the college thing, they're working their job that they got from their degree, but like that wasn't me. Like, I spent all my teen years doing music. I graduated, I stuck myself in a van with 4 other people that I hardly knew because we got signed to a record label, and we're like, we're just going to tour this country. I toured the country. I went all across the United States. And then, you know, when that, you know, phased out because the financial hardship, you know, then I started with Reptiles, and then through Reptiles, like, I'm able to, you know, I was able to buy a house, and I just was able to figure out my way. And like, you'd be surprised by how much you can achieve just by like putting an honest try. You know, you just got to put the effort. And mind you, like, everybody's life's going to be different. I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, get off your ass and whatever. But it's just like, you know, you could do it. You could follow your dreams, and you could figure out a way. And I'm not the wealthiest person financially, but I'm wealthy in the sense of being able to stick to my word and believe in myself. And luckily, I've had a good support system, and I continue to hopefully have a good support system. And I owe everything that I am today to those kinds of people.
Literally, that's great. Even small steps can give you a sense of achievement and push you further. Yeah, that's
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think we do. I'm sorry, we do have to wrap up a little bit. I had my lawn guy come today, and he completely ripped one of my Reptiles. So I had to catch a whole bunch of Phelsuma grandis, and I need to figure out where to put them.
Okay. I have no idea what you just said, but it's
it's the giant day geckos. I have a whole bunch of giant day geckos. Yeah, and then like he ripped their enclosure, so I had to catch them this morning right before this podcast. So they're sitting in bins, and I need to figure out what I'm gonna do. It's a mess. I either need to buy a new Reptiles or find them new homes because I don't know what I'm gonna do.